The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Wasim Al-Sindi from 0x Salon.
Hello there, everybody.
Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
The Bitcoin Group, keeping you in the loop.
Josh Shigala from the Standard.io.
Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to Issue 1. Issue 1, Bitcoin Ether slide on Friday as investors weigh potential fallout from Silvergate woes. Yes, Silvergate, the Bitcoin bank, is suddenly the Bitcoin bank in trouble, and it's causing the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum to fall by about 4 and 5%, respectively. Dan Eve, what's going on with Silvergate, which previously was the bank to Coinbase, Galaxy Digital, Circle, Paxos, and Bitstamp? They've given notice that they won't meet an extended deadline to file their annual report, and it's warned that they may not be able to operate for another 12 months.
Well, this is pretty huge, isn't it? I mean, there's some pretty big brands there with, Coinbase, Galaxy, Circle, Paxos, Bitstamp. They're pretty much the provider of banks for banking services for some of the biggest companies in the world that are crypto. So to shut that off means that people are, I suppose, they're reducing the off ramps, right? So off and on ramps, so people can only trade from Bitcoin to shitcoin to try and hedge their risk against whatever they see coming. But it seems like we're back in regulation season again. It's almost like in the bull market, the regulation season kind of comes to a bit of a halt because everyone's too excited about what's going on with prices. And in a bear market, regulation comes in because obviously people have lost money and they start to freak out. They complain to regulators that they lost it from some silly ICO scam. And then suddenly everyone starts clamping down again. Although they tend to tread carefully because they're probably investors of ICOs themselves, like with these people in like the SEC, as we've seen with the ties to FTX, right? The guy that was one of the lead guys at the SEC stepping down after dealing with FTX. But it seems like I don't know if it's to do with the general ripples of FTX. It just seems like this is due to a general clampdown from the US. Maybe they're seeing like the fact that a lot of Bitcoin mining is centered in the US, and there's a lot of Ethereum nodes in the US, and they're trying to kind of claw back on some of the regulation there to kind of put that hold on cryptocurrency. But yeah, ultimately it's going to make things difficult for people who need to cash out, who are in desperation for selling their Bitcoin, even though they should never sell Bitcoin, of course. But that closes the off ramps, and that makes things a bit difficult, and also closes the on ramps for people that are trying to stack up before the halvening, which is pretty much just under a year, just over a year. It's the end of March 2024. So ultimately, I think any bank that's dealing with crypto has to tread quite carefully. Even in the UK, I'm with 2 banks, and both of them have sent me individual letters, printed letters about cryptocurrencies and stopping services with cryptocurrencies. So maybe it's just a worldwide coordinated thing. Maybe it was to do with the WEF. Whoa, nobody knows. But there's definitely a clampdown happening, and regulation it's like we've gone from bull market to regulation market, and hopefully we step out of regulation market and back into bull market again soon.
Josh Shigala, Silvergate was the crypto bank you could trust. How did they end up this way? Is this just more contagion from SBF and FTX?
Yeah, but I'm not too worried. Like we've run Vaultoro since started coding in 2014 after the Mt. Gox collapse, and run it since 2015. And one thing I know from all my comrades in the crypto and Bitcoin industry that have run businesses in this is that in those earlier days, you had to open bank accounts on a weekly basis. because they were shutting them as fast as you could open them. And so any proper Bitcoin business or in this industry will have already 5 bank accounts with different banks because of that reason. Coinbase, I'm sure, has that covered. I think this is just a temporary thing. We've been in this bear market for so long that I think a lot of the weak hands have already left. So I think this little price shock down, people will just pick up some more. But anyone that's holding at this stage has held through FTX, has held through Luna, has held through 3 Arrows, so it's kind of like the people that are left are just going to be holding. So I don't see that there's going to be much more of a price shock from this sort of thing. Again, it's just a bank. Banks go. Bitcoin businesses understand that you have to have multiple bank accounts because banks are shit. The one contagion that could be worrisome from this is if Silvergate is actually bankrupt, and the FDIC can only pay $250K to Coinbase when they've have millions and millions and millions of dollars on there from customer accounts. So that is a worry. But I'm guessing Coinbase is profitable enough to maybe even have their own insurance policy.
Wasim Al-Sindi, how could a little bank crash take out 5% of Bitcoin and Ethereum?
I mean, the markets are narrative engines, right? So they create a reality of their own that may or may not be related to some kind of like underlying happenings or truth. The amount of money the amount of coins, collateral, assets on the exchanges where the price discovery happens is actually a very small proportion of the total supply of these cryptocurrencies. So the price could move around a lot with like very little, impetus. And so we're always post hoc rationalizing everything in this space. The prices go up and the prices go down, and people try to pin the tail on the donkey as to what they think caused that. I mean, what I will say is that there's a fundamental kind of like conflict of interest at the foundation of this, right? So banks and banking and permissionless cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, they're kind of like maybe not mutually exclusive, but they're like not the most compatible things, objects, properties, commodities, whatever, to fit together. And so it's never really a surprise to see all these tensions. We've had these tensions in the crypto space with banking providers or like whatever financial services providers, regulators, forever. And like many people in the past and the present, including myself, have tried to be kind of like go-betweens between the crypto space and regulators and people in the policy sphere and governments and things like that, to give them information or like ways and means to understand what's going on a bit better. Like I wrote a regulatory epistemology framework specifically for regulators, and like then went to work at a place where I worked together with the person that's now the most important regulator in the world for cryptocurrencies, and he read my regulatory philosophy text. We discussed it, but unfortunately when he took that position, he seemed to go out on the attack, and so the SEC has really been on the attack for the last 18 months. And I would say, like Dan made the point, that there's bull market and regulation market. I wonder if like regulation season, like the bear market happens because it's regulation season, and it's kind of like they go out hunting, it's that reminds me of the Elmer Fudd and Daffy Duck. Yeah. What is it? Duck season, rabbit season, that one. I guess the other thing is, like, we talked about compliance, and so with Ethereum, there's this kind of problem where parts of the US government have a kind of like naughty list, OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control. And they, that on that list is like people, corporations, nation states are now smart contract addresses that they don't like, and that if you want to comply with American law, you have to not do business with them. And now more than 50% of the blocks on Ethereum are, oh no, actually now it's gone below 50%. So at one point it got up to, I think, like 70, 80% were complying with this thing. And now it's come right back down. But there is this like censorship pressure on Ethereum. And that's something very real as a concern, not just for Ethereum, but for the whole space, because there are strategies that nation states could take to try and influence these things. And censorship is one of them. Yeah.
It does seem a bit like whenever the cannabis industry gets banking, the US doesn't want it to happen so bad. You always know it's going to come crashing down. Silvergate was that temporary halfway house where crypto businesses like Coinbase and Circle and others tried to play fair with the law, tried to play on the team, reporting themselves, reporting their taxes and so forth. Destroying Silvergate seems like it'll put them at a weaker advantage, as well as putting the regulators at a weaker advantage. But if your goal is an unregulated environment that you can then jump in and regulate, then it seems like you're setting up your goal. Moving on to the exit question, the price of Bitcoin is down 5%. Dan Eve, will it be higher or lower this time next week?
Higher.
Josh Agala, higher or lower?
Higher.
What's the email sender? It's all positivity here. Will we go higher?
I believe the price will be exactly the same in 7 days, like to the nearest Satoshi.
Of course, we have the greatest predictor in all of Bitcoin history right here. The last 2 weeks, it's refused to predict. Refused to predict. So here we go. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week?
Give it a holiday, mate.
Here we go. 2 weeks off. Big prediction. A lot of people are going to put their money on this. Higher this time next week. Most likely. Most likely. The ball is bullish. The panel is bullish. This is crazy. We must be heading for a huge collapse. Moving on to issue 2, Binance woes. There's nothing but trouble this week for Binance, the exchange without a home. They used to live in Malta. One time they lived in the south of France. Now nobody knows where they live. The Binance exchange USD coin will be unlisted from Coinbase. Binance's asset shufflings are eerily similar to maneuvers by FTX, according to Forbes' digital assets section, which you can't read on the normal internet. And investors are pulling around $6 billion out of Binance's stablecoin. It doesn't look good all around for Binance. Josh Agala, is Binance another FTX in the making? Have too many people trusted a good exchange that doesn't have a home?
You know, the centralized exchanges should always never trust them. Like, you should never trust them, not always, never. You should use them to do a trade if you need. But I'm just such a big fan of DeFi. I just love it. I'm a big fan of it. But you know, obviously people want actual Fed dollars and European Central Bank euros and stuff like that sometimes. So you need these things. But look, Binance has always got the potential to be an FTX or a Mt. Gox. All exchanges do. So does Coinbase. So be wary out there, folks, and remember that Bitcoin is not Binance. It's not, you know, CZ isn't the CEO of Bitcoin. CZ isn't, you know, Mark Karpelès isn't the CEO of Bitcoin, and neither is Brian Armstrong. So Bitcoin will continue doing what it's doing. These exchanges, look, it's so profitable to rehypothecate funds. That's you know, Bitcoin was created so we could get around the banking sector, who first of all bail themselves out, bail themselves in, rehypothecate funds, which means basically have a store of money and pretend you have more of it. So the more and more that this happens, the more people will distrust that and move to DeFi. So I just be careful, folks. BUSD has been turned off. I'm not too worried actually about Binance at the moment. Personally, I don't store any funds on there, but they've been pretty good actors throughout this time. They haven't been like terrible. They've, you know, there is some nefarious transactions, but these transactions, there is always a shadow of a doubt. And before some sort of a court case, we shouldn't freak out. Of course, these sorts of bank run style events are really good at testing liquidity at these places. And Binance has stood up to some pretty hardcore liquidity crunches in the past. Yeah, so I hope that they're fine, because they've, you know, I don't want more of this industry to keep on getting taken down. But this article from Forbes definitely looks like an attack piece to try to crush. And there is a pincer attack on crypto. And for everyone that thinks that there are actors there that don't, like, powerful actors don't exist, that don't like crypto, then you got to think again, because there are. And there are very powerful actors that don't like this industry and want to take it down. And by coordinating attacks on narratives, you can take that a long way. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin every 10 minutes pumps out another block. And that's all that really matters.
Wasim, what do you think about Binance? Will they become another FTX?
I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what's going to happen to Binance. But like, I mean, you have a crystal ball, like, so yeah, we should be asking you. But like, yeah, I mean, like the signs don't look great. And like, you know, I think I agree with Josh's assessment of like Binance. Like, they're not perfect, but they're also like, they're not the worst, and like they are pretty big, and like a lot of people depend on them. And so if that goes down, it will, like, there'll be a lot of ripple effects, like, you know, arguably much more than FTX. So that's, you know, I don't think anybody really needs that right now. And it gives more kind of fuel to the kind of regulatory fire that is being stoked at the moment. I think we should also say there's more than one kind of reason that an exchange, like a centralized exchange, might fail. Like, so you could have like kind of technical failure, which leads to, like, you know, whatever, loss of funds, which is a bit like what happened to Mt. Gox. Could be like somebody just runs off with the money. That's happened to, you know, Cryptopia was an example of that. Yes, there's all kinds of ways these things might, or like, you know, with FTX, like risk management, I suppose, is what we're calling it now. You know, what happened there with like a lack of segregation of funds and things. Yeah, and so I hope it doesn't go down. But I also, like, I don't touch it. Like, from the start, I looked at it, I was like, that is not for me. And so I've never touched it. So I'm not personally affected, but like I also know that it's like FTX. It's one of these massive on-ramps to the world of tokens and cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and all the rest. And so the sorts of people that would be affected by the failure on Binance might be like a lot of people that are newer to the space. And then, like, you're kind of burning another generation of people that are getting interested in these technologies, which I don't think that's good, because like many of them, we might think of them as shitcoiners now, but they might be Bitcoiners of 5 years time, 10 years time. Like, 'cause we've all, I think, walked through those waters when we arrived. So yeah, I'll finish with a Shakespearean corruption. And so, which is to be USD or not to be USD, that is the question.
Extra points for Shakespeare. Very good. No, I mean, it's been interesting to see Binance grow. When it started, it seemed like it was almost a Kickstarter project, a very small exchange. It became a huge exchange, taking up so much weight in the room, getting to so many projects, actually seeming ahead of Coinbase many times, despite their different origins. Damn, Eve, though, why can't we use an exchange like an exchange? We always pull our cart up, we trade our goods, and then we just leave our goods there. Let the exchange manager manage our hay and so forth. Why don't we bring it home and put our hay in our own barn?
Well, after being stung on Cryptopia, as Wasim mentioned, it suddenly reminded me of the horrors of Cryptopia. and BitGrail, which was Ryblocks, like back in a long way, and many others. BTCE, MintPal was like my first thing. I don't learn lessons very well, but I agree with what Wasim's saying. Like it's the newcomers that are going to be burnt from it. That's the sad thing. And these are people that turn into, the curve is that they hear about crypto, Bitcoin. They think the boat sailed. They hear about crypto. They get into crypto, they get burnt, and then they become hardcore Bitcoiners. That's just the kind of way it goes. But I treat exchanges like the hokey cokey, in, out, shake it all about. Like if you need to do a trade, like don't leave your funds on there. Don't leave anything in anyone else's custody. I can barely trust my own, but at least I know that I'm kind of trying to be safe in the meantime, and that I know that I'm not going to be misappropriating my own funds. Like I'm not saying that Binance is doing that, but like that can happen with third party risk. And as Josh said about rehypothecation, like that's just seems to be, especially in the crypto world, that's what happens. Like one person lends it to another, lends it to another, lends it to another, and that's why we've seen this massive cascade of companies going down after 3 Arrow Capital. Now when I was looking earlier, the BUSD had a market cap of 9 billion. I think it's gone down since then. It's now under 10. 10 billion. It's now under 10. It's now 9 something, which is the same level it was in May 2021. And you look at the chart, and it was 22.5 billion, 23.5 billion, sorry, at its peak, which was November 2022. And since then, it's just been a huge downward spiral, and down to just below 10 now. What's crazy about that is that you'd probably expect the stablecoins to be doing well in the time of a bear market, because people are trading them a lot more. They're trying to stay out of the bear market into what they believe is a safe haven, briefly in market turmoil. So that dropping so significantly is quite a sign. But I don't have anything on Binance at all. I barely use them whatsoever, ever. But I just like I don't know. I think I like the way CZ is quite transparent. I like their Seifu kind of fund, and I think that more companies should try and actually model themselves the way they are transparent to their end users. And what's funny is that we often, like, when Binance is discussed, it often gets criticized because of its lack of a home, going from Malta to here to there, wherever, to try and sidestep regulation. And yeah, that's what, like, of course it's trying to sidestep regulation. Like Bitcoin didn't want to be regulated. No one wanted to be regulated in Bitcoin, still don't want to be regulated. Like that's what you do when it doesn't mean you're out to be nefarious. It's like the idea of privacy. Like, just because you want to keep something private, it doesn't mean you're being nefarious with that. Just because you don't want to be strangled by regulation, it doesn't mean you're doing anything nefarious. So I don't want to see Binance fall. Ultimately, I think we've had enough falls that we could do with a bit of a break.
Well, obviously, I don't think anyone's rooting against Binance here, but I have just always kind of had a bad feeling about them. To tell an analogy, once upon a time, there was a drug website called Sheep Marketplace. And everyone always said that the customer service at Sheep Marketplace was really great, top notch, right up until the weekend when they exit scammed. When all the
wool over your eyes.
All the wool, and then all the sheep got fleeced. And it was hilarious because their name really was Sheep Marketplace, and that's really what they did. Obviously, Binance is much more legit than that, but it is a complex issue when you start moving around from place to place, when you're doing kind of libertarian hero things. One side you're like Dread Pirate Roberts, John McAfee, you're whoa. And then you're like, does CZ get to become Bill Gates doing those libertine hero things, or does he end up on the boat with McAfee with a shotgun going crazy? And we say this many times, but it's amazing how many people come to Bitcoin or other decentralized projects and say, wow, this would be a great project for me to snap my centralized institution onto. And we've got some of the smartest, hardworking people like Brian Armstrong and others who've built their business, Coinbase and others, as completely centralized institutions that kind of take a lot of the bang and the buck out of Bitcoin. They take the personal responsibility, they take the censorship resistance, the way that mining pools in future articles are being used against people, calling them centralization. it's just interesting to see that many times this keeps happening. And Dan, remember, you got to keep don't misappropriate your own funds. You got to keep the candy fund in Snickers and Reese's Pieces and peanut butter cups. You don't want to mess around by reappropriating your own funds.
Never get high on your own supply, or as Wasim said, become unregulatable. I was just thinking with BUSD, one of the interesting things about that actually is that, and about the bank run on BUSD is that because smart contracts are actually so transparent, there's a buffer zone that Binance probably have where they can review the smart contracts and see how long is actually left. Because obviously the thing is with stablecoins, a lot of people kind of stake them in weird different ways or whatever in different protocols. So there's usually unstaking periods or lock-in periods. So they've probably got like quite a reasonable view of the buffer that they have of people that are locked in with their BUSD to say, right, we can go down to like 4 billion before we start to shit the bed, because the smart contracts get unlocked from this protocol, from that protocol, like Curve or whatever, that are in the 3 year or the all that sort of stuff. So
it's a buffer. It's a liquidity buffer, right?
Yes. Yeah. So they've got kind of a view of like, they've almost got foresight of when there could be a bank run on BUSD.
And Wasim, what do you think about CZ's plan to kind of become ungovernable? Does he become Bill Gates through this? Is this just kind of Steve Jobs' classic advice that it's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy?
I think this is like the which way Champagne Man. Like there's the fork in the road, and there's like Bill Gates and there's John McAfee, and we don't know like which one it's going to be. So like I'm interested. I'm watching very interestedly. There's a very special place in my heart for John McAfee. Like I know he wasn't a perfect individual, but like I did appreciate his vibe. And I remember once I spoke at a conference in Transylvania. It was in Romania, and we were there in Cluj, and a whole bunch of us. And then John McAfee called in to speak. He was like keynoting. He was on his boat in international waters doing his talk, and like just behind him was one of those kind of like mobile hospital screens on wheels, and like so he's giving his talk with the screen behind him, and then like you could see people kind of like rustling around, and then like his wife came out from around it, and you see he was living on this tiny fucking boat in the middle of the ocean. And I thought that was I don't think he died. Like I think I don't think we've seen the last of him. So yeah, I mean,
he was definitely a showman.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I love that.
I think it's the difference between John McAfee and CZ though is that John McAfee acted like some sort of drug empire king when he wasn't a drug empire king, and he had no real he wasn't that wealthy. He just liked making a drama of everything and making a show of that drama. I mean that.
I do think we found a really good point of comparison here, where CZ, Bill Gates, John McAfee all have these weird tendencies. CZ's made billions of dollars, doesn't seem to spend it. Like all these little small things. On one side, you're like, oh, that's very clever. He listens to classical music all the time. But on the other side, you're like SBF, and you're like, oh no, he listens to classical music all the time. It's a bad sign. So I really do think we're at an interesting turning point for these two characters. And of course, the highlight for me when John McAfee spoke at the Romanian convention is that Theo Goodman, our good friend, got up there and they said, okay, Theo, ask him a question. And Theo asked him what his favorite gun was. And you could tell McAfee was blown away. He's like, this is the best question I've ever received. Like for short range or long range, obviously I like a shotgun, I like a handgun. He had a whole answer to it where it was like, when you see these people on TV and they get the same question over and over again, McAfee gets that hot wings, hot sauce question from Theo. And he loved it. So yeah, I don't know if he's dead or not. But
I remember at one point, Theo and I were at the back of the room before he had to go and do that bit, and like we were asked to be quiet because we were laughing so hard and we couldn't control ourselves.
No one would step up either. No one had a question. They had to go to Theo. But we've got to move on to the exit question. We got kind of a bonus issue here. Exit question. Binance is also getting into artificial intelligence powered NFT generators. Wow, that's a lot of buzzwords in one sentence. They call it Bicasso, and apparently you can just type the words in and then push the button and make the NFT. I actually think it's kind of clever. They've capped it at 10,000 mints. Just generally, Josh Shigala, and then we'll go down the line. What do you think about Binance's new NFT AI generator buzzwords?
Well, look, in the beginning of Bitcoin, 2010, 2011, 2012, when the community started getting bigger and bigger, every talking point was Bitcoin's a tulip bubble, and just kept on talking about it. And it's like, hang on a minute, but the main thing about Bitcoin that there's only 21 million. How can it be a tulip bubble? Yet then NFTs come along. I never hear the tulip bubble analogy ever coming out of anyone. Yet there's literally infinite amounts of these things that people can create. There's no cap on none of them. And now you get this sort of fast food AI imagery getting pumped out. It's the end, it's the end of, I think, and it's not the end. Like, there's still artists that really create cool stuff, and people, there's always going to be collectors of certain people, but this is sort of the end of the hype train of NFTs, I think. By the way, on the standard, we're looking at using because we're representing people's debts as NFTs as well, so you can lock up funds, borrow from yourself, stablecoins. But if you can't pay that debt off, you've actually got an NFT that is the key to that debt, so you can trade, you can sell that debt like a anyway. So that's going to be generated a little bit as well with some artificial intelligence, just to for fun, but. but yeah,
I think Josh has got a great analogy with the fast food art, but unfortunately I see it as maybe even Warholian, as if the computer has a signature. So if there's something unique about the Binance AI and it makes 10,000 interesting images, they could be good. And I'm also reminded of the Banksy movie Exit Through the Gift Shop, where there's an artist, and I don't even know if he's real or not. I think he's called Mr. Brainwash. And I swear I saw a couple of his pieces recently in Las Vegas. I thought they might be his, but he just kind of slams pop culture together. And if the AI could do that, then the AI could be Mr. Brainwash. It could be Banksy, and it could be all owned by Binance on the Binance BNB chain. How convenient. Well, how wonderful. Wasim, what do you think about Bicasso?
I mean, I don't have many thoughts about Bicasso. I don't think it's that important. I think it may represent the end of a cycle, as like we've been suggesting. But I would just like to say that I don't think art is quite dead yet. So let's not ring the death knell. I live in Berlin. I hang out with like loads of quite interesting people that use the medium of the blockchains and tokens to do quite interesting conceptual stuff, which you would not be able to do somewhere else. So this is just a bit like we're using one thing to make a bunch of stuff like a smoothie or whatever, and then we're like force it down people's throats with incentives of economics and finance. And so that is not particularly interesting conceptually, but there are people doing really interesting conceptual stuff. So I'm actually quite I see interesting projects with NFTs too. I don't like NFTs, I don't touch them, but I see people doing quite interesting conceptual stuff with them. Just not on Binance or Binance Chain or anything like that. No. So yeah, I would like to give a shout out to my friend Paul Zeidler, who has a project called Straylight Protocol, where he's built a bunch of autonomous agents, like little termites, that run off smart contracts on Ethereum and Optimism. And so that, I think, is like, they're doing quite interesting emergent, like, whatever art, tech art stuff. And like, that is interesting. This is like painting by numbers, literally. But that's okay. I guess it's got a place. Elevators need music, right? We don't necessarily have to get a human to do that. And so like, we need wallpaper for stuff. And I think this is basically like, yeah, we're making some wallpaper here.
Yeah. And by the way, people can do this already. I mean, I think Thomas made already some curio cards from AI.
My background is VQ GAN plus Clip 2021. So like, Everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Well, and come on, Wasim, the elevators didn't write the music.
No.
Different.
I
So
want
no,
I want a decentralized autonomous elevator, or I'm taking the stairs.
Yes.
I want a smart elevator that has a personality like the Hitchhiker's Guide. He's like, up again, down again. Oh, woe is me. But no, I think of it back to when we just had Photoshop, and Photoshop was another tool. And I was like, wow, I could cut up these photos and I could stitch them together. I could do the negatives. I could do this. Or I have this Photoshop thing and I can just pull up spray paint. I can just pull up clone. Like I have all these incredible options. The AI, whether it's the crazy writing one that I think is great for rough drafts and brainstorming, and maybe even asking it questions and getting some answers as a chat bot they're trying for Bing and other searches, or if it's Midjourney or Bicasso, it's amazing to have kind of a brainstorming session with a machine where you get an image back. And then maybe it's not the final image. Maybe you then work with an artist. The artist could shape the image the same way that a good editor could shape something that ChatGPT created. And it's just another tool. It's just another shortcut. And I know that horrifies everybody, but we're not writing with calligraphy anymore. Most people can't even read cursive. Dan, Eve, what do you think about Bicasso, Binance, and fine art?
Well, the weird thing about it is that about AI art in general is that if you think about it, it multiplies the amount of images that you're going to be seeing. Like if it takes one artist, whether they're Photoshop or original, it takes them X amount of minutes or hours to create a specific piece. Whereas like whilst you've been chatting, I've been just like freestyling on Midjourney about random things like Rick Astley giving up. Like I like conceptual stuff, like the Foo Fighters learning to fly, Rick Astley giving up, and like or like taking lyrics but it's just amazing. So what would have usually taken one or two or even five people an hour or so to come up with now takes like 1 minute, and you've got a selection of images, and then a few minutes later you can go down the little rabbit hole with those and change them slightly or blend them or whatever. It's absolutely it's mind-blowing. It's like crazy mind-blowing. But they're just, I think, obviously Binance are trying to capitalize on it. They're trying to make it easy for people as well. It's good that they've limited to 10,000 spots, because they do the whole 10,000 seems like the magical number now for all these generated.
Wow, scarcity.
Yeah, 10,000. Scarcity. Huh. Only 10,000 ever in series 1. Anyway, there's a series 2. But yeah, it seems like it's growing exponentially, like the number of services using it, and even just the things. I'm watching a lot of, or since I've started watching a few things on how to use Chat GPT to your kind of not advantage, but how to use it, right? How to get the most out of it. Here's a tool, how to use the tool in the best way possible. And there's videos of how doing Excel macros. There's writing essays. There's anything from creating you a pub quiz. It's just mind blowing. Like this stuff is.
Do you want me to tell you what it can't do, Dan? I can tell you what it can't do.
Go on.
It can't do really high entropy text generation like poetry or experimental like prose. Like it really can't. So like that is kind of seems insulated, which is great for poets, except for poets are extremely badly paid already. So like I don't know.
It can do bad. It can do bad.
I've tested on some like artist styles, and it knows like what a Bukowski story should be about, but it doesn't have Bukowski's style when writing it. It knows like Lewis Carroll. It's like, kind of a fanciful tale with Alice in Wonderland, and it continues, but it doesn't have his style. So we're not there yet. But some of the other ones where it does the voice, it can do the voice perfectly.
The thing about any of this technology is always not where it is now, it's where it's going. And so you can see a trajectory, and that's really how I try to invest money is, or resources or interest is where it's going. And that's definitely quite a frightening place.
I have a feeling though, this we might be in the kind of the steep bit of the S curve right now, and it might well tail off into the kind of like the tail of diminishing returns a little bit soon. It is like the pace is insane at the moment. So the thing behind me I generated 2 years ago, and it looks like completely old hat by now. So that like each of these things, the generations are going like, every couple of months there's a massive leap forwards in image and text generation. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
sometimes you think GPT is very smart. Other times it's just an enhanced version of Clippy. It's like, oh, you're writing a letter. This is what a letter looks like. And I think it's going to be very interesting because it's not really a tool for artists. If you think about Midjourney, like your artist, oh, I could draw something anyway. But your person that can't draw, your person that needs to prototype, make a storyboard, share their ideas, now they have a way where they might not be a visually expressive person, but if they describe it with enough words, if they tweak the machine a little bit, they can get some impressive prototypes that they could then share with someone, make a second piece, make a more complicated piece.
I know there's a lot of artists that are like saying, AI generated stuff is bad and we need to detect it and weed it out of actual art. But like, I'm one of the people that's like, why ban? Okay, no, sorry, fair enough. Ban drugs from the Olympics, but have a drug Olympics. Have like the fastest 100 meters when you're on speed, or just allow it, and then whatever, like an anything goes version. I like that kind of concept where like
I
you
actually
can just.
Dan, I actually pitched that as a show idea to Channel 7.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, called How High Can I Jump, or something like that. I said, there's all these athletes taking drugs and they got nothing to do. Let's see how high a human can jump, pumped to whatever. They all laughed me off.
I think that would be a show that would go down a treat on YouTube, though.
I think so too.
That would literally go like, if it wasn't for someone sat there objectively going, or subjectively going, oh, I don't like that idea. If it's just random people on YouTube going, yeah, of course I'm going to do that with my Friday night. We're going to watch the Drug Olympics. How high can I jump?
I do think with the AI and other things, you could have a competition of like speed novel writing or speed show writing, and people could show how they use this tool to enhance their work, and they work as a group, and then they feed the group results into the machine. The machine gives them another idea. They work as a group. They edit it down, and I think we got to show Wasim's here. Oh, it was Clippy all along. Oh no.
Yeah. Now let's see who you really are, ChatGPT.
I see.
It's coming
Microsoft
soon.
Office, like the old school. Oh my word.
Oh, we better move on to the next issue. We're running out of time. Check out worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got 3,034 videos, and they're all free. That's amazing. worldcryptonetwork.com. Also a good time to push the like or subscribe button below. Moving on to issue 3, Ethereum moved to proof of stake. Why can't Bitcoin? There is no technical obstacle to making the notoriously energy-hungry cryptocurrency far more efficient, just a social one. The MIT Technology Review seems to have no interest in the security discussion of proof of work versus proof of stake. They've summed it all up into one point, that Ethereum is good for the environment and Bitcoin is bad for the environment. You might have guessed, we called it here. We told you this would happen, and now it's happening. Wasim, what do you think about the battle between proof of stake, environmentally friendly, and environmentally destructive and catastrophe proof of work?
I have a few thoughts about this, Thomas. I'm writing a book about proof of work at the moment, so I'll try to limit the number of thoughts that you get at once. Much like Bitcoin limits its transaction throughput through the magic of proof of work. So first thing I would like to say is there's this kind of idea of intersubjective consensus, which many Bitcoiners have been talking about for a long time, between the kind of technical infrastructure, the protocol, and so on, and then the social layered people that use the thing that actually make this network real. And so we have a protocol series of rules which instantiates people run the code that that protocol is built specified by the protocol. They become nodes in the network. That is the network. They're sending transactions. That's Bitcoin. So it's open source software. There's a GitHub repository. You could that code could be changed, and like there's a process which has kind of emerged over the years. It's got its roots in the kind of open source and free software movements. It's run through Linux mailing lists, and then there's a GitHub repository, and then there's discussions about upgrades, and then like that can lead to a code being pushed. But there's also a requirement that the miners that are doing the proof of work also are on board with this thing, because ultimately they are the ones that are putting the blocks on the chain, and that's that's how the history of the network is architected and agreed upon. So it's complicated because there's many different stakeholders. Like you've got the developers.
There's also the nodes, right?
Because they had users as well. Yeah,
the blockchain war, that the nodes, the users, weren't going to go along with what the overlords thought would be an easy upgrade to more block size.
Yeah, so we thought code was law, but it turns out that node was law, actually, because the users are in control of the network. Without the users, there is no network. But the miners and the developers are very important as well, and they can, most importantly, influence the users with like their sort of hard signals on the network, and also with kind of the soft signaling on things like Twitter and like YouTube, places like this, and so on. So it's
that there's like these Sybil attacks with nodes where people could run up thousands of nodes and sort of spoof the network and make them think that there's a consensus, but there isn't.
Yeah, so some kinds of signaling are cheap and some kinds of signaling are expensive. So proof of work is very costly way to signal. So like that's why when miners put their preferences like within messages in blocks, that is a signal that has been costly to create. Whereas a cost less signal or a cheap signal, I mean, I could just be like talking about how much money I give to charity, how great that makes me. That's a cheap signal. I didn't have to actually give any money to charity to say that. So if it'd be different if I like prove to you that, yeah, or like, I don't know who that is, but like I deny the allegations, but like I could show you a bank statement of like me donating money, and then that would be like I've shown you there's a costly signal. So yeah, it's always worth thinking about like the signals that you're receiving on social media or like through the network. Were they cheap or were they costly? Like what's at stake for the people that made those? And so there's something to say about like the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, and like why the kind of circumstances that led to Ethereum's migration to proof of stake might not suit Bitcoin. But I will firstly say like proof of work is like a marvelous achievement and technical innovation. And it does a lot of things for Bitcoin, which means that Bitcoin can stay architecturally and technically relatively simple. The protocol is relatively simple compared to all the other cryptocurrencies and blockchain stuff, because proof of work takes care of like security, coin distribution, and importing of randomness into the network. And if you don't have proof of work doing those things, you kind of have to find other ways to do them. And nobody ever likes to talk about that. So all the technical stuff gets buried before it reaches the finance people or the communities or whatever. So nobody knows about like VRFs and VDFs, or this kind of very sophisticated modern cryptography, which also requires specialized hardware to generate randomness, because we're not getting this kind of stochastic randomness from the outside that we get from proof of work and the mining. So there's like, we ended up making really complicated systems. So the new Ethereum system is way more complicated than the old one, and all the like Ethereum clones or the Ethereum competitors, like the Polkadots, the Tezoses, all that stuff, they're even more complicated still. They built like insanely complicated systems. It's crazy. I remember I used to run a conference series at MIT. It was sponsored by the foundation that is associated with one of those networks, and they were giving their sponsored technical lecture at that time, and I was sitting next to a Bitcoiner who's also got a PhD in nuclear physics. I've got a PhD in photophysics, and he looked at me halfway through it. He's like, "Do you understand any of this?" And I was like, "I haven't got a fucking clue what they're talking about, man." And he's like, "They built a Rube Goldberg machine again. It was so complicated. Like two PhD physicists sitting next to each other, we had no idea what was going on." So that's another thing. Like with complexity, you get fragilities. Like, because then there's all these kind of unforeseen, frailties or consequences or like interdependencies. And the more complicated things get, the more unreliable and they break. And we've seen that with all these proof of stake networks. They break quite a lot, actually. And so Bitcoin can't break. Bitcoin is the one that can't break. The other ones can break because they're kind of like VC funded startups, basically. But like Bitcoin is not that. Can't break. So we have to be quite conservative with Bitcoin, and that's why the developers, the miners, and all the rest have a very conservative view to the upgrading of Bitcoin, which I think is appropriate. But however, it means that Bitcoin moves very slowly in terms of like technical progress. It does, like compared to everything else around. That's IT kind of technology in nature. And that might be a bad thing. It might be that Bitcoin, it can't move as fast as it needs to. And that might mean that, for example, Bitcoin can't develop enough to make a mature market for block space before the subsidy runs out. And that is kind of like one of the big potential failure modes of Bitcoin. And also that's one of the things the regulators can do. They can stop industry building on top of Bitcoin or using Bitcoin, which might then retard the demand for block space to the point where Bitcoin can't achieve its security goals over a long period of time. So those are two very real failure modes for Bitcoin. I also just want to say one real quick thing before I stop talking about the difference between starting at proof of work and moving away from it, which is what Ethereum has done, and starting from proof of whatever and just doing that. So Ethereum did the coin distribution and built a big network, like a social, like the community, using proof of work and like mining all those years, and then switched over once the coins have been distributed. Basically, if you use proof of stake from the start, you end up with this kind of rich get richer problem where people have coins, they stake the coins to get more coins, and so then the rich there's a tendency for them to get richer. Judy Afanti and co-authors wrote a paper about this. I think it's called Rich Get Richer, Compounding of Wealth in Proof of Stake Cryptocurrencies. So it's kind of like a structural problem to proof of stake if you use it from the start. There's also an amazing paper called Formal Barriers to Proof of Stake Consensus Protocols. Matt Weinberg was one of the authors of that. I'd recommend anyone to check those out. And those kind of they're several years old now, but they kind of lay out the challenges for proof of stake. And I don't really think that any of the systems we've got now would be good enough to run for a network like Bitcoin from the start. But I also think Bitcoin will never change because the community is very conservative. And that is like possibly a problem for life on Earth. Like if we don't get enough energy and Bitcoin wants it all, who knows?
It is interesting to see Ethereum putting out proof of work first, then switching to proof of stake as a necessary way to build their system. Another way of looking at it, because we were looking at it, the pre-sale and everything, is it seems like they sold people something they hadn't built yet. And in this case, they actually built it. So good on them. They turned out. A lot of people had doubts in the beginning. Even the Ethereum client itself, the Ethereum network proof of work version, wasn't available before the pre-sale. It's very strange to see how the bar can be moved, and something that we're developing versus something that we dream about can happen. Let's see, Dan, Eve, do you have more on this? And remember, of course, right here on the Bitcoin Group and Other World Crypto Network shows, I showed you my graphic for the Bitcoin triangle. People disagreed with me, but look at it right there. The users, the coders, and the miners working together, not just the miners and the coders ignoring the users, almost in a parallel of a documentary I watched this weekend about the European Super League and how they didn't seem to care about the minor teams, and the fans of the product were left out of the planning, leading to a disaster. Dan, Eve, what do you think about proof of work versus proof of stake?
Well, first of all, is that why isn't it a parallelogram, an equalateral? Why isn't it equalateral?
Yeah,
equilateral triangle.
I was going to say the same thing. Why is it not equilateral?
So because the coders and the like, which one? If it's an equilateral, then it's a bit more. I don't know. Maybe someone was a bit drunk when they made that.
Oh, I know what you've made it.
Here we go.
Very clever joke, isn't it? I get it. It's about scaling. This is a scalene triangle, so it's about the Bitcoin scaling debate.
Oh, what?
Nice.
Wow, so clever.
Nice.
Oh, that is really good. I feel dumb for not realizing that now. So on I think one of the cool things about these articles, apart from that they're made of general tripe of like going, but Ethereum now uses 99.99% less of electricity supply, avoiding all the clever things that are the reasons why proof of work's there, like security gain theory, and about the circulating supply distribution evening out before you switch over to it. Obviously, Ethereum was mining, but it had a pre-mine as well, so it's not comparable to Bitcoin from a proof of work, both starting a proof of work kind of way, because the initial owners of certain Ethereum tokens didn't do any proof of work. They just bought into an ICO. So they aren't comparable in that perspective. But what I do like to see from these articles is the things like the country's getting bigger. Like, I like it. Like, they go from like, oh, Bitcoin uses as much as Moldova. Now we're on the Philippines. Like, Bitcoin uses as much as the country of the Philippines. So it's nice to see the countries getting bigger as Bitcoin grows. The exahash rate's like 310 exahashes at the moment. I think it was peak 350, which means it's dropped, and this is something that's really cool. It's dropped. So since its peak of 350, oh sorry, it's at 350 roughly this month. But it's dropped 10%. That 10% is more than the amount that it dropped is more than the entire hash rate up until mid 2018. So that's how crazy it was. Bitcoin was going for nearly 10 years, and that's the hash rate it reached. And we've just dropped that much within days, and it's like there's nothing. The network is still impermeable. It's still the most secure network on earth, and that's why we're using it. It can't be gamed by owners of the coin colluding. Obviously, there's the thing about the. I'd like to hear your take on that as well. But I see about the mining pools, right? So how a couple of mining pools, contribute to so much of the hash rate. But ultimately, there's some crazy statements in that article, like the EU saying the central bank has previously stated it cannot imagine a world where governments would ban gasoline-powered cars in favor of electric vehicles, but not act on Bitcoin. What does Bitcoin use? Electricity. What do electric cars use? Electricity. Ta-da! They both use the same type of electricity. Electric cars don't specifically use only completely green electric. Like, that's what's silly about some of these statements. They don't even think about it when they actually write it. And also, in principle, a small number of people could take the reins and switch Bitcoin to proof of stake. No. That's ludicrous. They could probably propose the code, but it would require the entire community to vote it in, right? It requires miners. It requires the nodes. So saying that a small number of people, like, it just completely misunderstands Bitcoin. Am I being thick, or is that like a complete misunderstanding of how Bitcoin works? Like, a few people could completely change Bitcoin, and it's not down to the miners how they're signaling and how the nodes are signaling.
I think it's the kind of necessary oversimplifying that you do to encourage a second blockchain war. If you look at the last war, we found a small amount of people, whether they are programmers, whether they are bosses of giant corporations like Coinbase, cannot edit Bitcoin. It would have taken the users, it would have taken the miners, it would have taken the coders all working together. But if
they can edit the code and do a fork, and I'm pretty sure that's going to happen at some point.
Oh yeah, they'll have a fork, but if Bitcoin 2 is adopted, then Bitcoin 2 wins. Or if Bitcoin 3 or 4 or however many times we have to do this, we did, Bitcoin XT, Bitcoin Unlimited, Bitcoin Classic. Like, they proposed it many times, and many times it failed.
Josh, can I get a SegWit 2x? Can I get a SegWit 2x? Anybody?
Exactly, SegWit 2x, all the good ones. Bitcoin 2x, we'll just double it.
Make it a 3x, 4x.
The thing
double
is
your
that,
coin, like one coin. Go ahead, Josh.
Proof of stake has some interesting parts to it, for sure, in terms of the fact that when China banned Bitcoin mining, it was very, very easy to spot a Bitcoin miner operation because you could just see the energy consumption and shut it down. So proof of stake is kind of handy when you're just running some nodes or running some mining, you're sort of staking. It's hard to spot that. So you can say that it could be a little bit more decentralized, but the problem is then you get these large exchanges. But there's a lot of exchanges now. So but it does centralize in these exchanges, and you can't just switch quickly if there's a bad actor because they just stop you from withdrawing. So it has its cons and pros. I think it's ridiculous that MIT of all places don't put a few more brain cells together. So for me, it's an obvious another little hit piece to try to bring down.
Do I have to come on here and defend my former employer, Josh? Is that what's going to happen now?
Yeah, that's what you're going to have.
So I used to work at the MIT Digital Currency Initiative, which at the time when I was there, 2019 and 20, was the largest concentration of funding stroke salaries for Bitcoin core developers. So like,
Wow.
shared an office with Corey Fields, Taz Dreiger. Like we paid Vladimir van der Land's salary back then as well. And I was
Amazing.
raising their funds to pay them. That was kind of part of my job.
Oh, well done. Well done. Yeah, no, like, MIT have been good actors, but
well, this is the
something
tech
like this,
review, by the way.
so-
It's not the DCI. This is not the Bitcoin researchers that wrote this. This is kind of like a
Yeah.
tabloid magazine.
It doesn't, yeah, it doesn't read like it. And it really is just intellectually dishonest. Like, if you actually look through, especially some of the reports that have come out about how much energy is used, but also what happens, and we've talked about this subject ad nauseum on this show, but the key takeaway is that proof of work has put more money than any other industry. The Bitcoin industry has put more money into R&D on finding renewable energies that are cheaper than any other industry, because it's just so profitable if you can find a better source of energy. So if you're really a greenie, you'll be pushing for this, because humans are insatiable with the amount of energy we want to use. All right, it's endless, like, especially with electric cars coming online more and more. We want to take more and more energy, and so it's ridiculous to say we got to use less. This whole notion of like, what was it, the green hour or whatever it was, where everybody turns their lights off for an hour and we all, it's just so stupid. What do we want to go back to, like having campfires in our tents and all choke and have black dust in our throats? Like, we've got to just find better sources of energy. And like, there's just endless amounts of energy. The ionosphere is full. The under the earth is full. We're literally on a ball of lava, boiling constantly, forever. It's crazy to think that we've got to use less energy. And so proof of work, while yes, you can say, ooh, it uses so much energy, so does the PlayStation on standby, as Thomas has said before. And so what are you going to choose? We're going to turn off the PlayStations, actually unplug them all now, because, well, what's the use of that? It's just people
actually,
having
my
fun.
PlayStation is contributing to the security of a global network.
Yeah.
Well, it is interesting, Josh. When we were kids, all of the light bulbs were incandescent bulbs, so they were actually burning a filament that would eventually run out. Now things have happened so fast. They're LED bulbs, they're plasma bulbs, LCD bulbs, whatever. There's all kinds of amazing new technologies where turning off the light bulb is not so important anymore. In the same way, although it's facile to say, we could science our way out of this. We could develop some new energy technologies. We could turn this around. Or like Josh is saying, we could have this other attempt where we try to have a less consumption society, which many people are afraid of, and I don't want to scare them more. But I want to quote the end of this article, which I thought was an incredible shot across Bitcoin's bow. It says, Nicholas Weaver, a researcher at the University of California, Berkeley, and an outspoken critic of cryptocurrency. Normally, we don't quote outspoken critics as our conclusions unless we disagree with cryptocurrency from the beginning, says that Bitcoin will never change. As long as Bitcoin miners can profit from proof of work, they will choose proof of work. The only way to reduce Bitcoin's criminal energy consumption, so we're making value judgments, is for the value itself to be destroyed. If Bitcoin becomes worthless, then the Bitcoin mining stops. Bitcoin may not want to change, but if it doesn't, it might be forced into irrelevance by governments and communities that are becoming increasingly intolerant of its energy waste. The never change Bitcoin crowd is fighting a losing battle, says digiconomist Dave Rise. The sooner they realize this, the sooner we all benefit. So very much lines have been drawn between the environmentalists and the Bitcoiners, and the environmentalists in an almost stereotypically Ayn Rand move are going to use the government to crush these new Bitcoiners and their technology. It's
the thing is, what this absolute clown refuses to admit is that the Ethereum miners that were mining before haven't just disappeared. they've just gone and to mine something else. It's all the people consuming electricity on Ethereum the whole time haven't just gone, oh, we'll turn it off.
Just
They've
by the way,
gone and
Josh,
mined
like I was a small cap miner in a former life, and there's not actually that many proof of work coins left. Like, so ETC is one of the bigger ones. Not that many of the Ethereum miners moved there, and that there's no new like low cap GPU coins. Like that kind of stopped happening. So I don't know how many of the Ethereum miners switched to other coins. In honesty.
So you think they just turn it off?
I think a lot of them, like you can now buy GPUs very cheaply on the open market. So I think actually people turned them off and went back to gaming or sold them. Like a lot of people dismantled their rigs and they stopped doing low cap proof of work after.
Well, and this does go back to
I'd
a
love to
larger
see some
point we
data on
talked
that.
about, where Ethereum is this network for smart contracts, for dApps, and for projects. Bitcoin is this network to change the monetary factors of the world. And some people think that's more important, right? Bitcoin is this airplane flying around the world. It can never land, as Wasim mentioned earlier. If Bitcoin did crash, it would be bigger than FTX. It would be bigger than Mt. Gox. The entire cryptocurrency industry would crumble down, and we would be like Nintendo and Atari in the 1980s. We'd be like, maybe we shouldn't call these things video game machines. Maybe we should call them something else and give it another try, because it had cratered so horribly. If anything does happen to Bitcoin, that's why it's always interesting to see the altcoiners and others marching around Bitcoin, wishing that it would die, when in reality it would crush their project as well.
Oh,
What
blame
is weird
ET.
is that actually since Ethereum went to proof of stake, it's AMD. I know this is a bit of a spurious correlation, like that amazing thing, which is like the number of movies Nicolas Cage has starred in and the number of bath deaths or whatever, and it's a perfectly tracked graph. But Nvidia and AMD shares are actually up since Ethereum went into, which is kind of counterintuitive, because you'd think that Nvidia and AMD, both the biggest producers of graphic cards in the world, have gone up. The prices have gone up since the miners, like the biggest mining function of GPUs, stopped.
Honestly, Dan, they didn't really like the miners. Like the last few models they put out, they tried to like purposely hamper miners that were using GPUs. So like I think that they kind of hit a lot of the semiconductor production is like quite limited globally by the number of foundries that exist that can do certain nanometer dies, and so there is actually this massive bottleneck in the production of high-end semiconductors. So like there's just not enough to go around. So like the gamers, not the people that need to do like whatever training machine learning models, they hated blockchain miners because they were taking like large quantities of the global supply of these things, and now it's just evening out a bit, I guess. Like it's weird that like Nvidia and what's the other one? I can't remember. AMD haven't like created, but they also like their share price is very volatile. They already probably had a bad year last year.
Well,
I think you answered it though.
AI,
yeah, that's it.
training it takes up a lot of that, I think, because we're in this boom at the moment of training models, and
it's funny that there's like a crypto bear market, and then there's like an AI boom, and then like maybe there'll be an AI winter, and then what might happen over here. Yeah. Oh, we didn't mention mining pools, by the way. I think we should just quickly say, because there was an article last week that Foundry, which is the digital currency group related mining pool, had amassed like some large amount, I can't remember now, 35-40% of the hash rate recently. And then people were waving the same warning flags as we've seen many times in the past when one mining pool starts to get a large amount of hash rate. So I haven't followed it so closely to know what's happened with that, but it's not great news for Bitcoin if everyone's pooling their proof of work mining on one like cooperative or one mining pool, because even though the work is distributed, the way that work is allocated is centralized by the pool. And so like that means that one pool is kind of in control of how the mining gets done of a lot of Bitcoin, and that is not great.
What about, so Roll Duke is in the chat said, what about Stratum V2?
Say that again, sorry.
Sorry, what about Stratum V2? How's that going to the mining protocol?
I don't follow Stratum that closely, so I wouldn't know. But like better mining protocols for sharing the work are always better. But I don't know if like that removes the ability for the mining pool operator to determine how the work is allocated. I don't know.
It is worth noting as well. The author seemed to think that the 5 mining pools were, stratified and locked down forever. People can leave a mining pool. They can switch to another mining pool. It's a lot easier to switch to another mining pool than it is to get the 8 or 10 developers that control Bitcoin to change the code, right? It's a much more trivial thing. All they are both technical things. You'd have to edit a text file or whatever. It is different. And I do think it's an interesting idea, as Wasim was talking about, that the gamer enthusiasm for this graphic cards could overwhelm what was a loss of the mining income. A couple of guys like Bitsby tripping, rolling into the store, buying everything early, camping out overnight to get graphics cards seems very big to us. But in reality, the larger market of people that want to play these games, who are now happy because they can go to the store and buy one or pick up a cheap one that someone's not using, could actually raise their status. So that's interesting to see. Again, a reminder of how small cryptocurrency really is compared to something like gaming. Moving on to issue 4, we're running out of time. Bitcoin NFT mints surpassed 200,000, but is interest in ordinals fading? No one really knows about the ordinals. If you send the Satoshi out of your account, do you really get that Satoshi, or do you get a different Satoshi? Does that mean that the artwork's different? If you don't run an archive node, as many people will not do as they get larger and larger, do you really store the picture? Is it really there on the blockchain? And now people are printing less and less ordinals. The ordinals fees originally topped $1.3 million, now has decreased to 54,000, now decreased again to 11,000. Josh Shigala, they've got NFTs on Bitcoin. As Dan the Dark Pill, one of the creators of the very first Rare Pepe, says on Twitter, Bitcoin wasn't worth shit when it started. Rare Pepes weren't worth shit. Ethereum NFTs weren't worth shit. No one was sitting around going, this is going to be billions of dollars in 2 years. On the other hand, lots of shit hyped itself up to be $1 billion in 2 years is now worth fuck all. Responding to an article about how NFTs on Bitcoin built with inscriptions and ordinals will be a $5 billion market within 2 years. We've also seen Yuga Labs, the creators of Bored Apes, planning to create a ordinal NFT PFP Bitcoin buzzword project. Josh Shigala, what do you think about ordinals? Is it fading?
That'll go through its boom and busts. I mean, it's the thing is, which technology do you choose if you're releasing something? It's a tricky one. You generally want to choose where the liquidity is, because that's where the buyers are. So eBay was around for a very long time. Because there were so many eBay clones, but people still listed on eBay because that's where the buyers were. I think one of the things of Ethereum and the scaling, and how now there's so many different scaling, or L2s for Ethereum, is it's splitting up that liquidity a lot. So it does give something like Bitcoin ordinals a chance to get into the market, because that liquidity is so spread that no one wants low liquidity, because if you do a market order and it just crushes the price, it sucks. So and in terms of NFTs, because they're sort of one-offs, you need that buyer to find you. So I don't know, like, we'll see what happens. If Bitcoin, the problem I see, NFTs for me are really, everyone thinks of art, but I really love the idea of NFTs in the DeFi space, NFTs representing debt or representing something else, or keys or ticketing, stuff like that. Like, there's massive use cases for this stuff, but art for some reason has just grabbed the imagination of so many people, which is great, because it's brought in so many new people into this space. But I don't know. Like, I like the fact that ordinals are on Bitcoin. I also don't like it because it's kind of spamming the network, even though they're paying the fees. And that goes back to the old the conversation that we used to have when Eric Voorhees had Satoshi Dice, and people were bitching and moaning about that, spamming the network. It's a great debate, actually. And I really love having that philosophical debate. If you pay the fees, Is it spam? No, I don't know. Like, so I think it's opened up that debate again, and it's actually found a couple of little bugs within Bitcoin having ordinals as well. So, which is also fascinating. As we develop new use cases for Bitcoin, it might have like introduced new sort of attack vectors. So yeah, I really like that ordinals came along. I don't know how different it is. I haven't looked in it too much. I don't know how different it is from like old school colored coins and stuff like that. I mean, they were effectively the first NFTs, but yeah, but I don't know.
Obviously, as one of the creators of Curio Cards, the truly greatest Ethereum NFT project ever made, I'm very impressed with the power of NFTs. And now, Wasim, I ask you, could these great NFTs that were pioneered by Rare Pepe, Spells of Genesis, Curio Cards, and CryptoPunks, could they be the savior to Bitcoin's fee market?
I'm really interested to see ordinals pop up after like Taproot Wizards and all of that. Like, I think it's really cool to see something fresh in Bitcoin, because like not that much happens in Bitcoin actually. And like, yeah, so nice to see people finding new ways to use the protocol and to use the resource, the scarce resource, which in Bitcoin is the block space. Well, I mean, the coins are limited, but like really what everyone's competing for is the block space to immortalize your transaction in the permanent record. And that's why we need the coins. You need the coins to pay the fees to put your transactions in the record. So like ordinals are like large, they take up a lot of space. They take up a lot of real estate on the blockchain. So they're paying the fees and they're creating demand for block space at a time in the market cycle when there is not that much demand for block space. The prices for transacting on Bitcoin are quite low. And somebody I think maybe Eric Wall he did a talk recently on Taproot Wizards, which I recommend people watch. It was quite nice. He reckoned that as of a few weeks ago, the differential in price to write per kilobyte into the Ethereum and Bitcoin blockchains was 7x. It's 7 times more expensive to write into Ethereum at around this time than it is to write into Bitcoin. And so that's telling you something about like how little Bitcoin's being used compared to Ethereum. And so like uses right now, like in the depths of the bear market, uses for Bitcoin, it's good news. Like this is how like we keep the competition for block space dynamic and high and moving. It keeps the fee market from collapsing. And ultimately, like when the subsidy runs out on Bitcoin, which will happen before too long, this is how we're going to have to pay for Bitcoin securities through transaction fees for block space. So like, I would like people to get used to stuff showing up and paying for block space to etch their data into the permanent record. I guess like there's always the thing about like, what is it? Are they writing that they're writing into this permanent record that's stored on tens or hundreds of thousands of nodes around the internet? People have already put like a goat on the Bitcoin blockchain, I'm sure. So like, you can put all kinds of objectionable material on there. And so that is a, permissionless innovation, right? You can't stop people from doing the stuff. And that's kind of a feature and arguably a bug, depending on how you look at it. And so, yeah, I like Josh's points about like the general utility of NFTs. Like they're just like wrappers, tokenized wrappers for claims to access to like whatever rights, cash flows, control of stuff. So like it's great. It doesn't have to just be JPEGs. Like we've seen a lot of JPEGs in the last few years. I'm sure we're all like seen enough of that. Yeah, I mean, like remember that we just had a pandemic. Like we're still in it if you ask some people. And so that is one of the reasons why NFTs got adopted by the art world so vociferously, so suddenly, is that the gears of the art market just seized up. Like the art fairs and the whatever exhibitions and stuff had to stop immediately. And so like art people rushed into this stuff. And I can speak to that because like I've basically spent the last 2 years explaining this stuff to art people pretty much. Like, so they've just been rushing in, asking people like, does anyone know about this? So I'm like, well, I'm here. I could tell you something if you want. But okay, here's something about ordinals. Like lots of people are inscribing stuff onto the chain, but has anyone seen any good art yet? Like anything good? I haven't seen a good one go into ordinals yet.
I thought it was fascinating, but they stole the CryptoPunks like lock, stock, and barrel, and another group published them, and then they were declared the real CryptoPunks on ordinals, and that was fascinating to watch.
What is real?
I like the Vlad heads, the Bitcoin heads or whatever. Yeah.
I need to see
just because I'm one of them.
He added that.
About Satoshi Dice, by the way, just really quickly, like I thought it's a really nice example to bring up because, like, yeah, it was basically doing a bunch of one Satoshi transactions on Bitcoin. You were kind of flipping a coin, basically, and then like it got priced out because like the fee market, took hold, and then like ended up on Dogecoin or some shit like that. And so like that is good. It's good that there's like so spam means that the price of transacting is too low, and then like when the price of transaction goes back up, the things that look spammy will go somewhere else. So I think it's good.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's why, this whole Bitcoin maxi thing, I don't think is very good because there will not ever be one chain to rule them all. It's just the fact that you need other places, and people call them layer twos, but actually they're other blockchains. Like there are other blockchains. So
we didn't get the side chains, did we? We were meant to get trustless two-way pegged side chains. We couldn't do that. And so like the altcoins and all that other stuff, L2s on Ethereum and whatever, that exists because we couldn't do that, pretty much.
Yeah, but don't we have like Liquid and stuff, but people don't use it really,
I mean, Liquid is permissioned. So that's I think that's why.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's interesting to see, as Wasim was saying, we usually talk about when Bitcoin runs out of things to motivate the fee market, and we say, well, maybe Amazon would step in and run some miners and keep the network going that way. To actually see it as Amazon could publish a 10,000 figure NFT project, people could then buy them like you would donate to the EFF or the Internet Archive to preserve the Bitcoin network. So people are now buying the ordinal NFTs to keep the network going. And I'm also reminded of a great chat that Luke Dashir had with someone online when this Ordinals thing was just kicking off. And he was like, oh, it breaks the rules. And they're like, but the blocks get through. They follow the rules. They're ruining the network, but they're paying the fees.
He said they're cheating. They're cheating the network, or they're lying or something.
Yeah, they're lying to the code.
Yeah. And it kept going back and forth. He was like, oh, they've misinterpreted this or they've changed this. And it was like, but it runs, it compiles, at the end of the day, it compiles. We have to allow it. And I don't know if he said
I think
much.
maybe like, in his right hand, he's got like a text of the printout of the Bitcoin protocol, and the left hand, he's got some like Catholic scripture, and he might have got confused about which one he's been reading at that particular moment.
That is a problem. You get those confused. Dan, Eve, what do you think about ordinal NFTs? Go ahead.
Well, or just on that last bit about Luke Dashir, when he said about their trick in the code, it just made me think of that South Park episode but instead he's like going, they took our block space, took our do, like just all howling. But at the end of the day, if someone's willing to pay for it, they're willing to pay for it. And one of the things that is interesting, like that so many of the things that were used as a for Bitcoin, an argument for Bitcoin, when people don't agree with something that's happening with Bitcoin, they become an against. So like one thing is censorship, like you said, Bitcoin censorship resistant, and then there's like, well, you could censor the transactions so people can't put ordinals in, and there's quite a lot of these flip-flopping, which are quite interesting to see, like how kind of our own personal views come into something because you don't value the thing that someone is paying for. Right, but the whole point of Bitcoin is, people say it doesn't have an intrinsic value, but then there's the intrinsic value of the electricity provided from the proof of work. But then they're saying, but someone has to buy it, and there's this argument of, well, it's a free market, so if you want to buy it, then it's nice to see all these things go 360, and the critique of Bitcoin just shows it's positive because it means it becomes more resilient. You see the reasons why something has been put in place and the reasons why it's helping out the Bitcoin network, and the fee market issue's been around for a while, right? What happens when the block size does and because every time the halving happens, the percentage of the Bitcoin rewards as a whole of the circulating supply diminishes, even more. So back in the day when it was 50 Bitcoin per block compared to the supply was it was a significant daily amount. Now it gets even less. And so when you've got to replace that with something, and that has to become from fees, I think. But yeah, ultimately, I think the ordinals are pretty cool. I'm obviously, I wish I bought some and got involved in that. I think I looked at Bitcoin shrooms or something like that for a while. Again, they're kind of pretty much carbon copies of like CryptoPunks with like 8-bit mushrooms or whatever. But I think that at the end of the day, if you want to pay for it, then then go for it. It pays for the miners to secure the network. And what makes the network more secure? The miners being paid more.
Yeah, on that point, Dan, like real quick, I'm just reminded of Eric Voskuil's work on crypto economics, and he was talking a lot about a few years ago about the possibility of state-sponsored attacks using and mining on Bitcoin to censor transactions. So if, like, imagine the price of Bitcoin and the hash rate came down a lot and there's lack of confidence, like then a nation state level adversary could then start mining. And then like, if they got a large proportion of the hash rate, they could then attempt to like delay, censor transactions, selfishly mine, and all the rest of it. And so like the demand for block space means that the price and therefore the security, network security, the hash rate stays relatively high, and that makes it harder for well-resourced adversaries to mess around with the network. So that's why it's good in a very concrete sense.
Yeah. And I think that we need people paying more money for the block space, right, to make it more precious. Like it's why have empty block? If there's a use for it, then why not make it useful?
Just want to shout out to Roel Duke, who's been busy in the chat there, and also for the super chats to the network. It helps us make better stuff and pay for some editors and maybe get some clips going again. So thanks a lot.
Definitely. Thanks to everybody that gives us a thumbs up and subscribes down below, leaves a comment or says something in the chat. It's always good to have that interaction. We don't really do the show for money. It's more about the community. We've got one more question. It's an exit question, kind of a bonus issue. Is Ben Arc Satoshi Nakamoto? A new article from BitcoinNews.com uses a picture of Ben Arc and then begins the article saying Satoshi Nakamoto remains an obscure character, obviously pointing to Ben here in the picture. Ben has recently been the impotence, although they don't talk about him, behind the Noster network that's become so popular. He's working on LN Bits, which provides a wallet infrastructure. Kind of seems all the stuff that the Lightning companies were supposed to build. Even Jack Dorsey launched his own C equals company just a few days ago, and it sounds like a carbon copy of what Ben has already been doing with open source software. Josh Shigala, I ask you first, is Ben Arc Satoshi Nakamoto, and or should we change our symbol of Satoshi Nakamoto from the Japanese man, Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto, to the Welsh man, Ben Arc?
No, I don't. As much as I'd like him to be Satoshi, he isn't. Satoshi is just an idea.
We all know it's Adam back. No spoilers. Wasim Al-Sindi, is Ben Arc Satoshi Nakamoto?
Well, as you know, Ben Arc is the Bitcoin socialist. And so if Ben was Satoshi Nakamoto, then that would make Bitcoin a socialist project. And so that's like, I'll leave that for the audience to decide. Do you think that that's the reality that we're dealing with here? You could think of Bitcoin as a transcendent machine socialism, where the workers are the means of production. The miners themselves are the workers and the participants in the network. So it is kind of a socialism, but not, I think, necessarily for humans.
I have seen more talk about Bitcoin progressives and that there are two sides to the Bitcoin debate. You don't have to be libertarian. You can be progressive. You can have your opinion. Josh, go ahead. You had more on that?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I know this isn't on Bitcoin, but the whole concept of DAOs is also really nice, and because you get people that anonymously contribute to a project and also own the project. It's so in a way it's like this nice fusion of capitalism and the socialist ideals, without this sort of left-right paradigm. It's kind of taking technological advances into people having a stake of a certain project and participating without permission, which is really cool. Oh wow, another super chat from Roel Duke, £20. Thank you very much.
The show sucks.
If people were mad when you said that Satoshi was female, think how mad they'd be if you say Satoshi is socialist. My goodness. Dan Eve, is Satoshi secretly a Welshman? Does Satoshi, the Japanese named eponymous creator, come from the United Kingdom?
Maybe. Well, now that you say it, Satoshialist sounds kind of, it's got a ring to it, doesn't it? So Satoshialist. Maybe
Real Satoshialism has never been tried, Dan.
They always do it wrong when they try it. It ends in a lot of deaths but ultimately it's good. Honestly, no one's done it right properly. But yeah, no, that would be really cool. I saw that. I thought Ben was the ghostwriter on that or something, but they put his image on it. That's amazing. Nice. But they didn't mention that he may be Satoshi. So maybe he was.
There in public.
He could be a guy. It could be that guy.
It's all out there. Everyone can see it. The article is very clear. Ben Ark is Satoshi Nakamoto. The whole Japanese thing was just to throw you off. But we're running out of time. Dan, Eve, I'm sure you're ready with a prediction or a story of the week. Go ahead.
My prediction is that Bitcoin won't be moving to proof of stake anytime soon.
Let's go to Josh Shigala, prediction or a story of the week.
No, story of the week is just enjoying working away, beavering away, building in this bear market. It's what you do, and yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Go check out the standard.io if you want to help us out. If you've got any graphic skills, if you've got any coding skills, if you've got any I don't know, whatever skills you have, come and join us.
Wasim Alcindor, a prediction or a story of the week?
My prediction is that Bitcoin is a time machine and we could use it to navigate possible futures. And you could read more about that on the 0x Salon website.
Nice.
That sounds great. Very interesting.
What website is that?
I run a institutional research collective in Berlin called 0x Salon. So it's number 0, then X, SALON, .pubpub.org.
Nice.
Very good. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. Just a sad farewell to Homer Dog, who passed away this weekend. He was about 11 and a half. He was about 13 years old. So just everybody hug your dogs, hug your children or your cats, your animals, whoever you got. We're very lucky to live such long lives as humans. And we're very unlucky that our pets don't live as long. So thanks to everybody for the thumbs up, subscribing down below, and hug your dog, cats, and children. And until next time, bye-bye.